Welcome one and all to another episode of Save Yourself Podcasts. This is episode 3, which is all about health in general. I'm joined in the Future Hub studios by co-host Sarah. Anyone who think that she lived here? Welcome, Sarah.
I think I probably do. Hello, everyone.
So, following on from our first 2 podcasts, which have been about water, which is without doubt the most important thing to drink to aid good health, today we're going to discuss all other aspects of general health and wellness. We've called this podcast the Wellness Wheel, which if our production manager Digby is on the ball, which he always is, then you will now be looking at our interpretation of what we've called the Wellness Wheel. But before we even address that, Sarah, if we could just do what I always do in my rather direct style, what does good health and wellness mean to you?
Oh, such a great question. Well, there's a range of aspects really that affect everyone's health, but the bottom line for me is that I wake up every morning and subconsciously or consciously, I'm never sure, I make an assessment of how I feel in my body. Now, maybe that's my age, because I'm sure when I was younger I didn't think about it, I just jumped out of bed. But it gets more complicated as you get older. So, the stuff that runs through my head is, do I feel strong? Am I feeling stiff in my back or my neck? Am I clear-headed? Am I excited? Do I actually want to get up? Am I looking forward to my day? Do I feel solid in myself or do I feel fearful? And I'm sure, like everyone else, these aspects are fed through a whole range of factors, which might be financial worries or environmental issues or emotional stuff that might be coming through. It's a complex picture. So, health and wellness it's not just any one thing. It's such a range of factors.
It is, which is obviously why we've tried to depict that in this wheel so that we can actually break these individual areas down. And that's probably a good starting point, is that health and wellness isn't just about you feel. I think there's an element of control in your life, isn't there? Am I confident that I'm doing things which I consider are good for my health? Do I have the right direction? So the wellness wheel itself, let's just have a quick look at that together, everyone. And as you can see in the centre of it, we've put mind, body and soul. Mind, body and soul, we all talk about these things as if they're individual subjects or areas, which to an extent they are, but they're all interconnected. Yeah. And then around the mind, body and soul, because what we're trying to say really is that you are in the centre. You are the centre of your own universe. Around that, we've got what we consider to be natural elements, and then around the outer circle we've actually got, I suppose let's term them, lifestyles. So all of these things are relevant. So let's go back to the very beginning then. Now we're only going to touch on these things today because we're going to do future podcasts where we take each and every area on this wheel and do a podcast on that individual subject. So if we start at the middle then, Sarah, so mind, body and soul. Each of those obviously are a topic of conversation. What is the soul? Where is the soul? Your mind, is your mind your brain? Is it the same thing? So even though we've listed those 3 things, there's a huge amount of conversation can be had to see how people actually interpret their soul and their mind before we even discuss their body.
Well, also, obviously everyone is an individual, and that's the important thing. We're only really going to be able to talk about stuff from our own perspective. But, depending on where you were born in the world, what your cultural upbringing was, what the influences are in your life, your thoughts around mind, body and soul are going to be, vastly different in some different parts of the world. So if we start talking about stuff and you can't relate to it, we're very interested to hear what mind, body and soul means to you.
And interestingly, you mentioned the word there, individual. We are all unique. We talked about in our podcast about water, how each and every snowflake is unique. Take a look at your fingerprint. There is not another one like it. So as the snowflake has changed due to its journey, is our fingerprint different due to the journey that we've been on, either in this current life or maybe in a previous life?
Because completely. Literally, I love that you've just mentioned fingerprints. If you think about your hands, it's how most people actually greet the world. It's like, you pick things up, you touch things, as you walk along, your hands tend to go in front of you to a certain extent. I have done so much damage to my hands over the years, probably because I'm quite gung-ho. I can see cuts and, where I've jammed my fingers in doors, where I've run my fingers through sewing machine needles as a kid. My hands tell an incredible story. Everybody's hands do. And so, not only am I unique, but my hands are unlike anyone else's.
And I'd just point out to our listeners rather than viewers is that they've definitely got worse over the last year since you've lived up here on the farm. I've noticed that.
I tell you, they've really been through the mill.
So as we say that each of these subjects, mind, body and soul, we're going to do a topic of conversation on each and every one of them, but just using or getting back to visualising this wheel and what it represents then. So what we're saying is that a person's mind, for it to be healthy, should be clear. It should be clear of thoughts or fear. It should be clear of questioning, because you should maybe have questioned the things you want to have questioned throughout your entire life. Your soul is on its own individual journey.
Yeah.
I believe that souls are individual, but we form part of the collective. And interesting conversation we're going to have another day is that at this moment in time people can hear my voice. But where's that coming from? Is it coming from my voice box? Is it coming from my brain? Is it has the thought process been generated by my mind? Or am I speaking to you soulfully? Because obviously, to me, I personally believe it's my soul that's speaking to others. And again, reflecting back on the conversation about water, be careful what you say, because, your soul can impact on another soul in a positive or a detrimental way.
Yes, exactly. And if you think about that very aspect, the fact is that when you do speak, it's a vibration, and the vibration is carrying your intent. And there are people in other parts of the world who don't speak English, and they would pick up on the vibration of what you're saying and how you're saying without understanding the words. So they will know whether you're angry, they'll know whether or not you're talking with love in your mind's eye or in your heart. I mean, it's fascinating.
Well, let's relating back to vibration and sound and language. We're going to be doing podcasts coming up very soon with a few people to talk about not only the truth, but really what the truth of our language is, irrespective of which part of the world you come from. But we know with the British language or the English language, when we look and now study at many of these words, particularly from a lawful point of view, you really don't want to be talking and using some of the language that you've already previously been taught.
I know. And we're bound up in it. We're tied up in it, and it ties us in knots.
But you mentioned there also, we've talked many times about frequency and vibration. Let's actually just talk a little bit now about vibration. Because when you're listening to the sound of what's coming from your voice, as you say, you're making a noise. There's a vibration that comes with it. And some people have got deep voices, some people have got high voices, but you can interpret from the way that person is presenting themselves, whether they're saying something lovingly, something kind, something that's really highly emotive, it could be something detrimental, etc. But one thing we were talking about the other day was obviously the art form of humming. When you think that you hum, the vibration that comes from it. And the only reason I mention that is that when we go back to sound coming from humming, or the way that we speak, the attitude that we're taking when we speak, I had an interesting sort of thought a few months ago when I was listening to an individual that was saying that when you think about the vowels, A, E, I, O, U, when you actually say them as a way and a means of trying to create a vibration that's good for you, let's take the one that people normally know, and that's Om. So let's take A, E, I, O, U and look at the O. That is Om. But if you were to say A, Om, or Eem, I'm, Om, it's an entirely different sound. But that's something I want to talk about another day, is that, when we look at the vowels, was our language originally created from simply those noises?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I remember hearing that the sound, the elongated sound of "ayow" is meant to be God.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, but this particular thing that I was studying was a person who specialised in sound, and I know that our listeners can't see me at this moment in time, But obviously you can maybe express, Sarah, what positions I'm putting my hands and arms into now, and you can actually position yourself in the position where you should do that. So at the moment, I've got my hands above my head.
Fingertips together.
Fingertips together above my head, I suppose in the shape of a pyramid,
Yep.
representing the vowel A.
Or a party hat.
And the procedure basically is to say with the representing the A. So I've got my fingers in the shape of an A above my head.
Yeah.
And then from the A to go down to E is to rest them on my shoulders. Mm-hmm. Because the one thing that this person was saying is that although you're starting with E or I, it's the at the end of it that's really, really important.
Right.
So then you move from the A, E, and then the I is across your heart.
Or your chest.
So, or your chest area. So it's I am. And then the O is around
your belly.
Your sort of, let's call it your belly button. And what comes at the end? You. And then the U is actually placing your hands down upon the hip area.
Hip and thigh area.
So, but anyway, as always, we digress because health and wellness is such a massive subject. But just proving a point there, really, that, we talk about the mind, the body, the soul, we talk about language, the subject matter is just vast, which brings us back to a subject that we want to talk about in a podcast, which is, what is the truth? What really is the truth? We've talked about how we've been, for want of a better word, indoctrinated, not just through our falsified birth certificates, but the way the education system has educated our children incorrectly. And let's call them lies. That's what they are.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll get back on track and get back to the wheel that hopefully everyone's having a look at. But, before we do so...
No, when you were doing that with the fingers above your head and all the way down, I thought you were doing head, shoulders, knees and toes. I thought we were going to have a party.
Yeah, right. There we go.
Yes, so we've taken a little look at mind, body and soul. But then just outside of that, we've got sunlight. Now, we've already, in our last podcast when we were talking to Phil, we talked about the importance of light and how incredible light of any sort, but obviously sunlight being the most important one. It's how we energize ourselves. That's where the energy of life and healing comes from.
We said I said earlier that we'll discuss each of these topics in great detail in an individual podcast on each and every one of them. Let's talk about education, let's talk about finance, careers, relationships. But before we do that, and before we even briefly break these down today then, Sarah, let's look at not only the purpose of the wheel, because I believe that this wheel to an extent is complete. And I think that the point that I'm trying to make is that we all say that stress is the biggest killer. But what actually is stress? Let's do a podcast on stress, not just what causes people stress, but how that impacts upon the mind, body and soul. Because if we go around this wheel, what I'm trying to say is now, we help and support a great many people with some very, very chronic conditions. And some people will die due to the conditions that they have. And this is an honest podcast. We're not just going to talk about life. We are going to talk about death and how mainstream orthodox medicine, if you wish, is to me a sickness industry, not a health industry. But the point I want to make while people are looking at this wheel is, imagine that was a pie and you took any section of that pie away. So, for example, let's look at the one at the right-hand side, finance, water and intuition. If you've got a problem with your finances and you're not feeling very intuitive and you're not drinking structured, energized water,
you're in trouble.
You're in big, big trouble.
Yeah.
If you've got a problem on the left-hand side with your relationship and you're not getting grounded and you're not taking in clean, fresh air, you've also got a serious problem.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make is we've tried to design this wheel in a way where we can say, all of these things matter, and you need to try to do the very best you can to take control in all of these areas. Yeah,
absolutely. And although they sit fairly logically against other things, they all belong together. You know, they haven't been like sunlight placed next to law is I mean, obviously we want to illuminate, the truth about law, and the sun would help. But, there's certain other aspects which are very obvious with health and sunlight and food. But the fact is that law also relates to education, because without decent education, you don't understand the law.
Correct.
And most people don't understand the law. And also, if you've got financial difficulties, the chances are you're going to fall foul of the law at some time. Yep. If you don't pay whatever it is you need to pay. So this is kind of simplified in many respects. And I'd like to imagine that maybe underneath this clean graphic is a mycelium network like the mushrooms have, where all of it is connected and all of it is impacting.
The thing is, it is all connected, but part of the society we live in is actually to act as a disconnect, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's a favourite saying of yours, the truth will out. Yes. And it will, and I think this is a good start. So, agreeing with what you just did before then, so you started off with sunlight.
Yeah.
The benefits of sunlight, vitamin D.
Yes.
The warmth. Photons, the warmth. Yeah, we all feel good in the sun.
Yeah.
So let's just go through these subjects one by one, and then, as we said, let's highlight each one and do a podcast on each. So, How does the mind really work, and what is the mind, and where is it? Is it within your brain, or is the brain a separate thing from the mind? I've got quite a lot of thoughts on that.
Well, I think a lot of people talk about intuition, which is also in the wheel. But the mind, some people would say they get a gut feeling about something. And so the kind of decision making that they make, which you might tell yourself is a logical thing going on in the mind, is actually an intuitive thing that's happening in the body.
Well, here we go, diversifying again, is that we're now talking about the brain being your gut. Your gut is your main brain. But that's, again, a subject for another day. So that's the mind. The soul, we've already touched on the soul, sort of really, where is the soul? What is the soul?
Oh, and it's such a fascinating subject, because it's one of those intangible things, but then we're so deeply connected to it because it is who we are. How many times do some people think they've been here? Some people say, oh, this is my first time, but your soul is probably the thread. If you have been here more than once, it's the thread that has run throughout the whole of your existence.
Absolutely. And I think, again, let's utilise that word that we mentioned here again, which is connected. Everything is interconnected. Everything. And we're going to have a conversation about that in great detail. What do we mean by being interconnected? So obviously that brings us back to the third subject in the middle of there then, which is the body. Most people tend to focus when they're sick on the symptomology. Yeah. It's my body that hurts. But as we know, stress, a mindful event, can end up with a physical symptom. Yeah. Massive subject area to discuss.
If you have a chronic illness or you have pain in your body, if you've got the mental strength, you can override a lot of that pain. An awful lot of the pain in the body is emotional, and it then exacerbates the pain.
Emotion is something that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, because we come across so many people with physical symptoms or ailments, and they've not addressed their emotional issues. We can talk about that when we talk about our, let's call it coaching services or help and guiding, supporting services. It's the one thing that we immediately want to address. Where is the person within their emotional status? What is their emotions that's driving them forward or holding them back? It's an incredible subject.
Well, it's very complex as well, because emotions obviously are driven from experiences from childhood, even from in the womb. It's massive, as a lot of people will know. So
being Mr. Systematic, as you know that I am, it's just the way that I work, we'll go around in a clockwise manner. So from sunlight to food, the importance of food, again, is absolutely vast. We've talked about how people need to be eating organic fruit and veg because of the minerals and vital nutrients within them that are lost if you're not eating true organic food.
The issue for a lot of people, obviously, is the expense of organic food. And a lot of people say, well, I can't afford to do that. But one thing we've been exploring and discovering recently is that if you are getting good air, good water and good sunlight, and you are connected to the earth, through grounding, you need less food. So it means that the food that you do eat should be of a better quality if possible.
I agree, and the one thing I partially disagree with is the majority of people who will tell you that they can't afford to eat organic food. They've just spent £4,000 on a family holiday to Turkey, and they've managed to sort of, eat and drink probably in the majority, probably processed food. So there's an argument to that. So I do agree that organic food is going to cost you more, but then you're having to pay for it because of its quality. I love the next one around intuition.
Can I before we leave food, I know we're going to do this in more detail another time, but if I think back to my grandparents, they were working class, very poor, struggling. My granddad just grew his own food. And okay, people might argue that the soil is more depleted in the modern world, but it's not that long ago. I'm not that old. My granddad was around, in the up until about 30 years ago, and he was still growing his own food. So, and it didn't cost him anything, or very little.
It didn't, but I think, again, this is going to be another subject that we need to talk about, which is society and the world that we live in. Everyone is too busy to even want to have to create or have or hold their own allotment. That's what we used to call them. I mean, I was brought up the same. My parents and grandparents, they always grew their own food, and the taste, massively different.
Yeah.
But yes, so I look forward to talking about food. So as I was saying, intuition, what does that mean to you? It's people say, well, it's strange, isn't it? You've got water, air, land, almost physical things, whereas intuition isn't physical.
Oh, it can be massively physical. When you walk into certain situations, sometimes you walk into a room and you go, oh, I shouldn't be here. It's like you instantly know, or you suddenly find yourself walking down a street, or you find yourself in a situation where your whole body is screaming at you, get out of here, get out, because it's a danger thing. We have incredible intuition, but most people ignore it.
Trust your gut instinct. It's always right. Always.
Yeah.
Can I just say that again? Trust your gut instinct because it is always right.
Yes.
It can't possibly go wrong.
And very often it's the first thing that comes to you. It's like the absolute first thought you have that very often you dismiss, and you just think to yourself, oh no, that's ridiculous, irrational, that's stupid, that's ridiculous. And then it plays out and you think, if only I'd listened.
That's going to be an interesting podcast. Intuition, gut instinct, gut-brain axis. Fantastic. Now, the next one along, obviously, is water. I don't think we
our favourite subject.
I don't think we need to talk about that much one today. But the next one's interesting as well, isn't it? Air. Now, when we say air, are we talking about the general air that we breathe? And we know that there are various forms of equipment where you can take in additional oxygen or hydrogen. Because hydrogen, it's interesting, isn't it? Is that we all sort of say, oh, I'm sick, give me some oxygen. What about hydrogen?
Yeah.
So there's an interesting conversation. But then the air is part of the air that's out there. And we have to consider that the air that we're breathing, there is also vapour out there.
Yes. And, the fact is that, our air is being polluted through cars, through exhausts, but it's also being polluted through chemtrailing and, a whole range of other factors. But if we're lucky, we can manage to find ourselves in a forest, where the oxygen and the air generally tends to be fabulous for you. Going out and doing forest breathing and just being part of nature, you're going to suddenly start breathing in a different way. And you've got an incredible friend who does breath work, and we're going to have a podcast with her. Can't wait to do that one with Jo.
Well, I was actually just the words out of my mouth. I'm just going to go on to say is I'm really looking forward to this. Joanna truly is a specialist on breath work. And you mentioned something earlier, Sarah. We talked in the very first podcast about water being fuel. The fuel that we need to live from or live by or live with, as you said, comes in so many areas. You're getting fuel from the sun, fuel from your food, fuel from getting grounded, fuel from the air you breathe, but more importantly, how you breathe. You can actually control your own blood pressure just by the way that you breathe. Yeah. Now, obviously, the conversation we're going to be having with Jo is actually going to be even an extension of that, of how you can really generate a better feeling of health by doing breath work. It is actually work. You've got to learn how to do this.
Well, I was a member of a choir when I lived in Brighton called Wild Voices. And it was just the best thing was Noddy, who runs the group, she always did this fantastic breathing exercise at the beginning. And it transformed our experience. You know, we suddenly found that we could sing and we could reach notes purely because we had really practiced through, you know, using our lungs before we even started singing. It was just the best thing. So I would recommend going to a choir if you want to learn about breathing and really beginning to get in touch with your body.
Well, as you know, I do plenty of singing in the bathtub. And singing itself is, you don't have to be a good singer. You know, the art of singing and enjoying singing, it is itself in a release. I mean, we're going to talk about why people are recommended, or we even re-recommend to people, journal. Write down your thoughts. It's an action. Exactly the same with your thoughts and your feelings. Express yourself.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about helping people to become a lot more positive and a lot more assertive, it's actually about, it's like you can almost feel yourself standing up and breathing, and you raise your arms in the air. When you're feeling positive and confident, then you're automatically going to put your hands out and breathe deeply. Yeah. When you're feeling depressed or suppressed, you can almost feel yourself wrapping your arms around you, sinking into the chair. But
shrinking.
I'll tell you what was interesting, and just by sheer coincidence, as always, I was listening to a guy on YouTube. I think it was called Guitaro 5000 or something. I think he calls himself G5.
He's brilliant.
He's a guy that goes out into the general public with his guitar, and he says to people, will you come and sing with me?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people will and how many people won't.
It's about 1 in 10 apparently that will.
He always asks them the same question at the end of it. How do you feel after doing that? So please, everybody, sing a song. Sing it to yourself, sing it to somebody else, sing it in public, sing it in private. But singing is an incredible art form to help you to express yourself and to breathe better.
It really is uplifting. Fantastic.
So the next one then on the list is land. I think the most important thing about land is not just organic growth of your own food. It's getting grounded, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's also having the sense of freedom that you get when you're out and about in a landscape. Now, I know not everybody has easy access to countryside, but most people can get access to a park, you know, or just find a random tree and go and hug it. I mean, that's connected to the land. It's about connection. It's about actually knowing that you're not locked in a box. You know, you've got that opportunity to go outside and express yourself.
This is all about making change, isn't it? It's all about practicing good habits. You know, we've said is that life is a habit. Make it a good one. Make it a healthy one. And take that time out. Again, people are like, I'm too busy to take my shoes off and go and get grounded. You know, I'm not saying it's easy. I know that some things do require an element of effort and change, but the importance of getting grounded is phenomenal. You know, I know that we've done a lot of tests ourselves, and Phil's done plenty of tests on water, and he's done also plenty of tests, which we're going to see in future podcasts, of just putting some diodes into water that are full of mineral, and it lights the light bulb. Everything is about energy. Take your shoes off, go and get grounded. And if you want to, you can do a test on that as well. Yeah. You know, you stick a diode in the earth and hold the other one in your hand and take your shoes off, and you'll go from a reading of 0 to a reading of something like 6, 7, 800.
Yeah,
you know,
amazing.
The energy needs to circulate within us. We are an electrical conduit. Yeah. That's what we are. Energy is electrical. Everything about the human body is electrical. Yeah. Just as the planet is all about electric, it's all about energy, and you've got to recharge your batteries.
You have indeed. Now, something we mentioned the other day is ley lines and the energy that runs in the earth. And obviously, they crisscross the whole planet. And you get node points where 2 lines are crossing, where there is a huge amount more energy running through those particular nodes, which is where they built the fonts for churches. And as we said the other day, you know, the font was often the thing that was built first before they even built the church. So they would decide exactly where to put the font.
Where's the highest point of energy?
Yeah, exactly.
Which brings you on to another subject. We diversify again, dowsing. You know, sort of dowsing is real. Dowsing does work. A friend of ours who's coming on the show next week, actually, Paul's coming on next week to talk about a slight change of subject here, moving away from health to law. even though law itself, understanding your rights, is part of good health.
Yeah.
That you're not fearful. So, dowsing, another subject we're going to talk about, because I know that you do quite a little bit of dowsing, Sarah.
Yeah, I have done in the past, yeah.
As well does our friend Paul and many people he's in association
And
with.
my friend Carla. I mean, there's lots of people into dowsing.
But I've just mentioned the name, and I do like name dropping, so just as a reminder, the next podcast next week is going to be Paul talking about a general introduction to law. So that's done the inner circle then, or the centre circle and the first inner of the outer circles, if that makes sense. So looking to the right, to the outside perimeter then, we'll start there with the one on the left-hand side, law.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go into too much detail on that today, because as we say, we've been very fortunate that Paul's coming over next week into the studio, and I'm going to find this really interesting. Paul's a lovely guy, a lovely soul, and like many of us, he's taught himself to understand the truths and the lies within the law. But again,
he's become quite a warrior. Not a warrior, a warrior.
The take-home, Sarah, being that if you understand the truth of the law, and you really understand what it is, what it represents, and how you should employ it and deploy it, so that you've got the confidence to stand up when someone accuses you of something which is a wrongdoing, and that's not right.
And it happens way too often.
Massive subject as everything else.
Well, the thing is, we know that the conversation with Paul is going to be big and that it's complex, so it won't just be one conversation.
It's probably going to be about 3 podcasts, actually.
Yeah, and also we're meeting people all the time who have specialised in different areas of the law. So I think it is obviously a topic that's going to run and run. And very often that is the area in this wheel that people know the least about.
Well, we've been waiting a long time to create these podcasts, but as you say, the subject matter is vast and it's incredibly diverse. We have created something called HELM, HELM, taking the helm for want of a better word, which is health, education, law and money, of which those subjects are around here. But what I'm saying is, if you understand or have got a good understanding of health, to know it's your responsibility, even though people will support you. To be educated or re-educated is all about educating people with the truth.
Yeah.
Law, to me, we need to be starting with divine law, and no doubt we'll start that conversation with Paul when he visits next week.
Well, so much around the outer circle of all of these topics. We are at a point now where we've been indoctrinated, we've been taught all sorts of things, and we've got to a point now where we have to undo that. We have to unlearn the stuff that we were taught from probably day one on this planet, and unearth the truth, or at least explore the possibilities of what the truth might be, and then start to build a new reality for ourselves.
People often ask me a question and say, Glyn, what are we going to do? And I think that what they mean by that is, what are we going to do about the Matrix? Well, that's another podcast. But when we talk really about the Matrix that we live in and what people should do, you should start immediately living your own truth.
Yeah.
Don't take as much steps as you can away from the Matrix, but live your life as a true, honest, good person. Cause no harm. Never turn a blind eye. So the last thing on what we call the HELM initiative, or the HELP initiative even, is health, education, law and money, or health, education, law and payment. We want people to really understand that. Health is your responsibility. Education and re-education is about learning, talking, speaking the truth. Understanding the law puts you into it allows you to act as your true sovereign being.
Yeah.
And then the last subject, which we're going to move back to, obviously on our outer circle, is money.
Yeah, which we were never taught about at school. No one ever taught you even the basics of how to open a bank account or how to budget. Essential stuff.
Well, again, I don't want to diversify, but banks.
Yeah.
There's another subject matter. But
we don't know how long they'll be around for. But
we're talking at the minute about money, but money doesn't really exist, does it?
No.
It is part of the trap. But I would rather see money, and we've talked about this many times, by accepting our sovereignty, that payment should come from the effort that you make. It's an exchange of energy, isn't it?
Yes.
If I do that for you, will you do something for me?
Yeah.
And that's just It is a form of bartering.
Yeah.
So finances on there. Education, we said, is about learning, teaching, speaking the truth. Health we've done, law we've done. So, finance, it's a big one, because I don't care who you are in this current time, unless you're one of them. Most people are struggling financially at the moment. So we've got quite a few ideas, haven't we, how people can really sort of take a greater hold of their finances and spend their money hopefully a little bit more wisely. So I look forward to talking about finance and money.
Yeah.
Which brings us on to the last two subjects here, careers and relationships.
Careers is a funny one, isn't it? Because, people still have careers, obviously they do.
Well, I retired until I met you, and now we're doing this.
I know, it's the way it goes. Careers is a funny one. I would say that I've had probably 3 or 4 different sort of categories of career in my life. Obviously they're all linked, because it's all about the skills that I've got and I've developed. But what is a career these days? When my parents were young, they would train for something and then they did that job for the whole of their lives. And there are still countries that I've visited where people have trained for something and they wouldn't dream of stepping outside of their particular subject area. Whereas I feel like I've been quite flexible. So I think I've had a very flexible career. And now I'm doing something I've never thought I'd be doing in a million years.
Well, joking aside, I mentioned earlier about retirement. I absolutely love doing this. I don't see making podcasts as a job. I see it as a pleasure. And I see it as something that we are, in our own way, although we might only be talking to each other at this moment in time, we are trying to reach out to a greater audience. And as we've said many times, we absolutely love feedback. And it'll be nice for us to do a few lives. I think it'd be great to have an open conversation about the wellness wheel, and do a live recording and let people tell us their thoughts and feelings on all of these areas and these subjects. And that was the laptop's decided to wake up.
I think that's your career.
Jump up and
your
join
career
in.
Possibly.
Possibly.
And then the last one, which we haven't mentioned, is relationships.
Which is massive. You mentioned earlier there about sort of people doing things throughout their lives, whether they were growing their own food throughout their life or staying in the same career throughout their life. As we know, looking at our own family, historically people stayed married throughout most of their lives, but now that seems to be not the way. But I think
that's partly because we've given people a bit more freedom to make choices, and I think that society was such at one time that people had less freedom of choice.
When we look at words, don't we, and what do words mean to us? If someone says there the word relationship, does that mean your partner? Not necessarily. It means the way that you relate and interrelate with everyone in your life at a soulful, mindful, and a physical level. And
we are so different with different people. I mean, it's like, how do you talk to the postman, to the milkman, to the person in the shop, to the person in the bank,
to your boss? It depends what relationship you've got with a milkman.
I'd say none, because I don't drink milk.
Well, there you go. Well, there's another story, isn't it? Can't wait to talk about alternatives to dairy products.
Yeah.
So we said that we're going to try and keep this particular podcast quite short. I guess when we look at the clock or the watch, it's probably been a little bit longer than even what we anticipated it, because, as we keep saying, the subject matter is vast. I think that we've covered there a lot of positive attributes to all of these areas. There's going to be a hell of a lot of negative ones as well, which we also need to discuss. But I don't like to finish on a negative note, but I would really rather call this honesty rather than negativity. In your previous podcast, I say yours, our previous podcast, when we were talking about health disclaimers, let's just reiterate this to our audience. These podcasts, yes, they're going to be gentle, and they're going to be done with humility. But these podcasts are about speaking the truth. And as Sarah mentioned, and I agree with her wholeheartedly, I am sick to death of saying you can't say that this is good for you or that heals you. Well, yes, you can. And yes, we will.
Because we want to be honest.
Well, we're not going to talk about the good things that help heal people. We are going to be talking about orthodox medicine, and we're going to be talking about the amount of death and destruction that they have caused. Now, I've got statistics from people who've helped to heal people naturally, and I've also got the statistics of the people that they've killed. Yeah. So we're going to be discussing all of those things, aren't we?
We are indeed, yes.
So finishing off for today then, the wellness wheel, the whole thing together, it really is a whole. And people need to be able to take an element of control in all aspects of their life and in all aspects of the wellness wheel.
Yes.
So I look forward to future podcasts on every individual subject. And do you want to wrap us up for today?
Yeah, I would like to say, I mean, some people might be thinking to themselves, well, I don't have the capacity to cope with all of this. It's too much. And what I would say to those people is that's the whole point of what we want to do with these podcasts, is to support you in exploring the subjects individually, but also seeing them in context, in the whole context of your life. And knowing that you're not alone, and knowing that there are plenty of people out there with a huge amount of knowledge and big hearts and a desire to share. So, I would just say be heartened, not overwhelmed.
And it's a team effort.
Yes.
We're all in this together. Let's support each other together. And I suppose if I'm going to have the final last word then, is that, because I hear it ringing in my ears from our production manager, Digby, of which we're going to be doing a recording with Digby very soon, because he's a truth speaker, not a truth seeker. He always says to me, don't forget to say, Glyn, please like and subscribe.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, so I'm going to say goodbye then.
Yep.
And thanks a lot for your time.
Yep, see you on the next one. And please like and subscribe. Say it again, Sarah.
Please like and subscribe.
Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.